Thank you everyone for joining today. I'm Jeremy Miller, the Director of Marketing for LabArchives. Today's speaker is Natalie Stringer, our resident professor. She'll be providing some tips with examples of how to effectively move your course online, as well as provide a brief introduction to LabArchives platform.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Jeremy. I'm excited to be here today, everyone. Thank you for taking a little bit of time on your Friday afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm here in Maryland, so it's afternoon for me. To learn a little bit about how to move your course online, I'm going to provide some tips, some practical examples, and then show you what we have to offer here in our library of labs we call Lab Builder. And as Jeremy mentioned, show you what's in there and how to use it. I want to offer some practical tips so you can use this as everybody is making this switch in this time of COVID-19 to move online. So I'm going to be moving back and forth between offering practical advice and how would you do that in LabArchives and what do we have to offer. So a little bit of background about myself. I was a postdoctoral fellow at the National Institutes of Health where I studied a virus. It wasn't coronavirus, it was a gastrointestinal virus called rotavirus. I studied how the virus replicated, how it came together, and used the host cell to make copies of itself. And this is a picture of me at the Smithsonian, actually speaking with kids and talking about how viruses make copies, and what better way to talk about viruses than dress up like one. So then I was an associate professor at Montgomery College here in Maryland, where I taught microbiology, biology, and biotech courses. And I'm a firm believer in getting students involved in their learning process, getting them to build things, getting them to actually demonstrate what they know and show off to others and really have fun in that process. And so these are a couple of my students there. And then I joined LabArchives a little over a year ago as the Director of Content Development and Resident Professor. But a big reason I came to LabArchives is because while at Montgomery College and another institution, I was teaching online, teaching hybrid and blended courses, completed certification to train or to teach online. And I wanted to bring that experience to more instructors around the world. I really enjoy teaching online. I really enjoy teaching in an active or in a flipped classroom. And I wanted to bring that beyond just my own classroom. And so I hope I am able today to bring some of those tips that I've found work well for me, that I have found from other instructors work well for them, and that I've learned in my own education, my own training on online education. So we're going to move back and forth between my top tips and some concrete examples. But just to give you an overview of what some high-level tips are, is really start with that goal. Even if we're changing how we teach, what's on our syllabus, what is that goal? Starting with the end in mind. My first instructor, who was the very first time I was teaching, my advisor basically said, you always have to start with the end in mind. So yeah, you might have some exciting activities you want to try in your classroom, but what exactly do you want to achieve? The same thing as when you're thinking about online education. Yes, there's a great activity, but what is your goal? Then the second one I'll talk about is learning by building. So maybe we can't have our students actually be doing an acid-based titration in the lab, but maybe we could have that same learning objective accomplished or get to that same goal and have them do it by building something. Incorporate some fun. It's a stressful time, but it's also about engaging your students in the learning process. Don't have them not just be passively taking in videos or writing in worksheets. Let's get them involved somehow and engage in the process. And then this is important in the face-to-face classroom, but it's even more important in the distance learning classroom. Repetition is essential for them, but it's even more essential for you. And making that repetition fit your schedule and the way you want to work will help so much. So I want to introduce just a little bit of what this thing called Lab Builder is as I go back and forth between these tips. So I'm going to segue over to our platform and go through those top tips as I show you what it is. Let me pull this back up. So what you're looking at right now is the LabArchives platform. I've already logged in as Rosalind Franklin up here. I'm going to draw your attention to the side on this over here. So LabArchives works as a series of folders, subfolders, and pages. Most of the action in LabArchives happens in this middle. So if you think like your learning management system, you can add text, instructions to your students, attached PDFs, Word documents, anything, any sort of asset you want to give to your student. This action, same sort of thing happens in LabArchives here. So data you want to give to your students or data you want them to attach to the electronic notebook, you could put there. So all of that organization system happens on this side. If I bring your attention to the top, you have a search toolbar. So you can search across all notebooks or an individual notebook. So instead of switching, if I look here, instead of searching my paper notebook, I can search all of my digital notebooks with one keyword search. So I could look for all online labs with a keyword search. And it's going to look through everything and try to pull up exactly a keyword based on that. So I'm going to come back and bring your attention to notebooks number 2. This is basically saying, how many notebooks does this account have? Does she have 5 notebooks or 2 notebooks? And right now she has 2. So if I come back, I'm going to refresh the page. I want to bring your attention to how I've structured the platform. Right now we have generally 4 types of content, and I'm really going to focus only on one of them today, but I want to point out that we have 4. So we have labs, protocols, course packs, and textbooks. So textbooks, we are an ally of OpenStax. So we have 7 different textbooks that we're moving into this database of content. Probably by Monday, they should all be in here. All of these are organized, these subfolders are organized in the same way. So they're organized by discipline. I wanted to create a database that was much easier to find things. So we were comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. So I've organized all of the content in same discipline and then subdiscipline. So a lab has background material and assignments. So it's really fleshed out unit of content. A protocol is more just a recipe. Do this. There's not really an instructional background there. A course pack is more of a course in a box. It's all the assignments you might need for the entire semester, all of the labs for an entire semester. So if I come into a lab, I've mapped them out by discipline. I'm going to pick biology. These are all the sub-disciplines that we have so far to date. I'm going to go into microbiology. And this is a lab that's an example of a goal that we just put out, literally just put out this morning. So all labs have this same pattern. We have 5 pages where we looked at, we have the author, we have background materials, what level is it at, and what type of instruction is it appropriate for? Is this online? Is it in person? It has a background page for introduction. So mapping out the learning objectives. How long might it be? So is this a 1-day project, a 2-day project? All of the background information for students might need, a pre-lab assignment, a procedure, and a post-lab assignment. So I'm pointing this one out and bringing it to your attention because this is an example of a goal. So if anybody's ever taught a microbiology course, this is the perfect time of year, right smack dab in the middle of the year for the biochemical unknown. Chemistry classes often do a chemical unknown. So a student is asked to identify something and do a series of tests to figure out what they have. So they've learned the test, they've learned the background, and now they have to they're basically using deductive reasoning to figure out what it is. If we're moving to distance education, they can't do that test. So I worked with a colleague to be able to set up an activity where students can do this in the distance. So we gave them all of the background information they need. So they know everything about the test they're doing. In the pre-lab, we asked them to analyze a set of results. So we've given them the data. They have to look at the data and say, what is happening? Is this a positive result, a negative result? We provide a chart for them to fill in the data. So I'm going to scroll down here. They can open because we integrate with Office Online. They have spaces to actually enter data, interact with that data. We've provided some of the data for them to get them started. Once they wrangle with that data and dig into what it is and process it, because again, if the goal is for them to interpret data, analyze data, understand what that test means. Granted, they can't actually streak the plate or inoculate something, or maybe they can't do the chemistry part of it if we're thinking about a chemistry unknown. The goal can still be the data analysis interpretation part. For this particular assignment for micro, they then have to build a dichotomous key to help them use as a flow chart to do the unknown part. So that's their pre-lab. For the procedure, they're going to be given an unknown. The instructor decides what the unknown is. For this particular assignment, they get 3, but essentially this is going to work as a back and forth between the student and the instructor. So the instructor has a set of assets. I'm going to drag this over here that only the instructor has access to. And I have a key where basically the student's going to request the test, and then the instructor puts the test back in their notebook. So a good example here, if I can find the picture. Let's say the student requests the test for microbe number 10. You know what the answer is for microbe number 10. So you would place this picture in their notebook down here. And that way, the student is analyzing the results. They have to work through that process of analysis. They're still looking at real data. They're still going through that process. They still have to figure out what it means. They're still analyzing it. You're still getting to that goal of identifying the unknown. They just don't happen to be in the laboratory. We have the post-lab assignment. So they're still writing the report. They can turn that in. And I'll point out that all of this is editable. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So if there's something you want to change, adapt, by all means. This is brand new. I'm going to welcome feedback. I'd love to see how this works in people's classrooms. So this is just one example of, if you can't have students physically in your lab, maybe provide them the data, get to that same goal of them to analyze it, just flip it around. So another idea of how can, in an online situation, how can we get to the same, if we can't see them face to face, how can we still ensure that they're learning if they're not in our laboratory? So something that I've done in my classroom, I taught in a non-majors blended course for virology. And what I did with my students is I like to see them build things. So one of them is actually, it's pretty current, is I had them build models. So this is a model of MERS, a MERS virus. It's a coronavirus. This is about 2 years old, 3 years old. But it was a nice way for me, my learning objective is I wanted them to be able to demonstrate that they understood how, wrong one. So they understood how virus structure works. How do the capsid go together? What are the different parts of it? So I gave them benchmarks throughout the semester of what they needed to build for me. How are they going to go about it? That they had some structure and scaffolding around it, so that it wasn't loosey-goosey of, oh, just build a pretty model, but that there were tangential things that they could do. And that's something that I know my students enjoyed, that they could go through and actually show what they're doing. They can also show off to other students. Another way to do this in a distance learning situation is to have the students present on a topic, so they can become the authority about it, about something. So perhaps they can record a lecture. Maybe they pick a topic and teach that. I've had them come up with homework questions and discuss with each other. So another way to go about that, if we go into general biology, meiosis. Another way is to have them model. And there's lots of different ways to model. You can have them draw, you can have them use yarn, glow sticks, whatever, gummy worms. But this is a way, if they're building something, if they're interacting with it, there's that passivity of just reading a textbook, watching a video is taken away. You also know that the student is actually doing the work. So they're building something. Ask them to construct the graph. Have them hypothesize and say, this is what the data will look like. If they draw it, they model it, they're engaging more with what that should look like and what it should be. And you'll see much more interactivity with your students and getting to that ultimate learning objective goal. I think that segues nicely into the fun part. I often feel like in an online situation or even just teaching, I send out emails, hey, do this, hey, we're gonna do that, don't forget that. It goes in this black hole of emails and I never know if they're reading or not. And that can happen even more so if you can't see them and remind them when you come to class on Tuesday. So that element of fun and engagement can really help if they want to show off what they built, they're more likely to respond. And so another way to go about that, and this isn't my idea, this is actually comes from a LabArchives instructor, is take a selfie. So if they're doing an experiment at home, or they're showing off a model that they made, you can somehow incorporate into your lab or your exercise, have them take a selfie of themselves, have them take a picture of themselves, have them show off what they made and be able to share that with each other. It can be a nice way to really build in that element of ownership of their learning. So then another thing I would like to point out is repetition. So if I come down here. So coming back to that online blended class for the virology class. Scroll down here. There's lots of different ways to set up repetition. This is what's worked for me, is to have 2 due dates in a week, sort of a hard deadline where lots of things are due at the end of a week, and then a mid deadline. That kind of keeps everybody in check. So maybe there's something in the middle of a week that's one little check-in. Maybe they have to submit one thing to their notebook. Maybe that's one post to a discussion board. It's however you run your class, set something up like that. But another part of that, setting up that repetition and creating a pattern, especially as we make this switch to online, making those due dates fit around your schedule. So a good example is I like to work in the morning. I also have my Mondays are pretty open in the morning. So I always like to have my assignments due on Sunday night. That way I know that by the time I wake up on Monday morning, I can sit down, do grading, look at comments, give that feedback to students, and I have that bandwidth, that brain power to do that and give that feedback. Students also get in that pattern of, okay, homework's always due Sunday night, or at least the cumulative homework is always due Sunday night. Having that midweek touch base keeps them honest, it keeps them checking in, it keeps everybody from procrastinating as much. There's still procrastination, but it keeps it reduced if you have some midweek check-ins. And that can help keep it running and help that engagement piece. So another thing I would suggest, if we have a repetition, I'm going to come in here to general chemistry, scroll down to the limiting reactants. So a nice thing that can help in an online situation too is repeating yourself again and again in your instructions. It sounds redundant, it sounds annoying. It's what I have learned again and again in an online situation is people won't read your instructions. They're just not. Students don't read, we don't read. So having really laying out your instructions of, say, a checklist of for this lab or for this week, you will do X, Y, and Z. It's nice to either have a page or maybe a section on that page that's always the same that says, these things are due this week, and have that in the front. And then at the end, somewhere in the end of a section, repeat it again. Did you finish X, Y, and Z? And it can be copy and paste and be exactly the same, or just some way of reiterating, did you do X, Y, and Z? It's not hand holding, but it may feel like hand holding for your students, but it will save you a lot of grief in the end. If the more that you can place in front of them, this is what's due then, this is what we're doing here, this is why we're doing it, it can really keep everybody on the same page of what's going on. Because you don't have the benefit of being able to answer that quick question in class, just walking around of, yes, this is due on Tuesday at that time. So building in whatever repetition you can, but always make it fit your schedule. If you don't want it due on Tuesday, because you have a departmental meeting on Tuesday, make it due whenever you want. While I've said that repetition's good, trying to be consistent is good, you will have to have some flexibility in there, of course. Before I jump into how we customize things, what other offerings we have, how to set up a class, I'm going to pause for some questions.
I'm interested in virtual labs for organic qualitative analysis.
So for organic qualitative analysis, we have organic chemistry labs. I think, so I would certainly, I'm going to show you a list of what I have here. I certainly think you could take a look, some of these ideas of where you provide students the, not fake data, but artificial data, maybe previous year's data, and kind of flip that idea. So here's the procedure, here's data that was collected, have them interpret that. Maybe have them predict what the data would look like, but I don't yet have something, say a simulation where they would run, for example, a simple diffraction. So yes, these can all be editable and modified, and I'll show you that in a moment, but that may suit your purposes. So then the next one, in the lab folder, can you limit the labs to online? Meaning, can I only search for online labs, or can I just only let them see it online? I'm not quite sure I understand. So certainly when I search, oh yeah, totally. When you search, you can search for just online. That little toolbar, this arrow, you have a lot of different search options. So you can search just for online, and it should just bring up anything that I've either has the word. So actually, I should take a step back. So in this details page, way down here in instruction type, I try to outline anything that I think is appropriate for online instruction. Anything can be customized to be online, distance, however you want to put it. So yes, absolutely. So the next question is, what approaches do I have for non-open book online quizzes or tests? So, it's certainly of a concern for students that have notes texts available. So I'm going to give you two answers to this, okay? My first answer is your learning management system, depending on what you use, many times they have options where, say, a student has to put in a code, maybe they're restricted browser so that they can't go out, they can only be in their browser. When I've taught online, typically what I do is I put such a fine line, I put such a tight time limit on it that if a student hadn't studied, they wouldn't be able to complete that test in that time limit. Meaning, Yes, maybe they could go out, maybe they could have their book open, but they wouldn't actually be able to be successful. You know, they wouldn't, yes, they would be flipping through their book and going, but the time limit was so tight that they really needed to be sitting and answering those questions. So that's one way to go about it. My other approach, and especially the more times I teach a class online, my other approach is the more open-ended questions you ask, and the harder it is for the student to Google the answer or just copy it out of the notes or the text. Every instructor has different feelings about that, of whether or not they want the student to strictly take the answer from their brain, or whether or not, and don't want to have notes or text available. So in a situation like this, where you're a little bit limited in the time where you have to take your course online and don't get to play with all of these online tools, I might be a little flexible on whether or not they can have their notes or not. Maybe think about using more open questions where they have to do more design and analysis, and let them have their book, just give them a shorter period to answer their question. That's my 2 cents, just my experience. So then the next question is problem-based physics labs where students design their own questions and experiments. So this is actually I think this would be a great way where students in the notebook could absolutely be able to they would be able to design their hypothesis, design the experiments. They would be writing in their notebook, you know, this is my hypothesis, this is how it should work, this is what I'm setting it up, this is what I think would happen, this is what I can draw. And I'll show you that in a minute. But this would be a perfect situation of, you know, maybe they can't actually physically measure something because you don't have that access at home, but they can work through that thought process through there. I have a whiteboard over here. So if your students could record that and take videos of themselves and post that to the notebook, they could do something like that. So in the interest of time, I'll see if I can get to some of these other questions. I'm going to show you a little bit of how we move a piece of content over to a notebook we own so that we can customize it for your course, and then maybe how students edit it and how you build a course off of that. Keep throwing those questions into the Q&A, and because I'll take more questions in a minute. So let me show you this. So really, I think about this Lab Builder as a digital library of content. You can take anything that we have, you can take what you like from ours, move it over to a space where you can customize it, take what you like, take out what you don't like, add in your own content. We can help you add in content of your own. And so if there's a lab you already love and you want to adapt, add that in, take some of ours. And so then you can have the best of both worlds. So we've already sort of looked at how you find things. So let's look at how you could customize it. And then I'll show you how you can build a course off of that. So I'm going to go in here and look for a general chemistry course. It's down here. So this stoichiometry and antacid lab is a lab that could be completed at home. So before I get too far, so it's a lab that basically everything the student might need is something they could find in their household. So they need baking soda, they need some vinegar, they're gonna need, it's essentially quote unquote a kitchen lab. Some people don't like that phrase, but it's something where they're gonna meet the same learning objective with anything they might have in their home. I've found labs where, from a safety point of view, these are things that you already have in your house. I'd feel safe doing this with elementary age students. So the safety level is they're quite safe. How do we actually move it over? So if we're thinking about using this in our course, how would we move it over to somewhere we could customize it? So I'm going to come back to that folder, right click, and a window opens where I can copy to another notebook. So if you copy to, a window pops open and you can select whatever notebook you want to. I only have one other notebook, so I'll start the copy and it'll take over anything. I could take the whole folder or just one page. And we can see, whoops, I jumped ahead. So I have those two notebooks. I copied over to my course notebook. So if I come into my course notebook, we see that the stoichiometry and antacid folder copied over. I have my 5 pages. So let's go in here to that page. Let's say that I think that that timeline is off. It's too long, it's too short. This is what we call a rich text entry. If you hover, you have a pencil, you can edit. So if that's too long or that's too short, as the person who now has now I can customize, I can change this. I have the ability to change the text or perhaps the color, and I can save that to the page. So anybody who has the ability to edit that, who has rights to that notebook, can make any customizations they want. So as the instructor, if you like this lab, you could pull this over, start adding things to it, or take away from it. Uh, so, uh, so there's that part. Because we also have OpenStax textbooks, you can be bringing in parts of the textbook and complement some of your background section as well for your lab. So there's that part. If you wanted to bring in your content, you could bring it in here. Before I forget, I didn't point this out. Veneer is one of our partners. We have a number of their experiments in our database of labs. They're recently, just in support of all of their instructors, they're posting a whole bunch of sample data so that they can be used with their experiments. I'm going to try to get these uploaded as well to our library. I think Jeremy is going to post in the chat this link. But if you already use Veneer Labs in your face-to-face courses and you find some of their labs in our library, you could use some of this sample data for that idea of kind of flipping things around, where you give them the data, they have to interpret the data. So we walk through how to find things, how to customize things. Let's look at how to actually build a class. For that, I'm going to take one step back to my PowerPoint. I think of the LabArchives structure for teaching a course sort of like a pyramid. You as the instructor are going to build out the shell of your class, meaning you're going to build a notebook that you want to share a reflection of that notebook to your students. You're at the top of the pyramid, so when you create a course off of that notebook, the student gets an exact reflection of your notebook at the very beginning. So when you share to them, they see everything you see. Once they start putting in their data or comments or start writing in their notebook, student A, B, and C will be just a little bit different. Because you're at the top, you can keep sending out new information. So sort of like that micro online practical I showed you, because I'm the instructor, I can go in and put data into their notebook. I know what unknown they have, so I know what piece of data to put into their notebook. If I want to put in, if I want to send the whole course new information, I can do that at any time. Let's go back to the notebook over here. So I'm in my course notebook. I have this one folder. I go up here to the top and bring your attention to the course manager. It looks like a professor, and it's supposed to look like an instructor with a chalkboard. So if I click on the course manager, this works essentially where we create a course. I called it My First Course, and it's basing the student notebooks off of a notebook. So you can give it any course title you want to, and you can base that student notebook off of any course that you own. You have a lot of different options, um, things you can change. Maybe you don't want your students to see each other's notebooks, or in a situation that's in an online situation, maybe you really do want them to work together. So it really depends on how you want to set up your course. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of how the notebook works. We have I'll I, I'll leave that for another day. But you have a lot of flexibility for how you want to run your course. What I do want to point out is there's two different ways. There's two different ways to get your students signed up. The simple, super simple way is just to send them a link in an email. So just send them this URL link and maybe your learning management system via a mass email and say, click on the link. That gives them a sign up to create an account. The other way is to add a student email by email. And so that will give them an individual invitation to create an account. And that invites them to join your course, and they get added as a student. They see a reflection of your notebook, and you can always see what they're doing. So with that, let me come back here. We are, because there's a big need right now, we understand that instructors are making this dramatic switch to online. We've gone from offering one training session per week to 3. So they're at noon Eastern, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. If that doesn't work with your schedule, we have on-demand demos. So just let us know and we can set that up. Our support staff is amazing and we'll work with you to get that set up. To get you started, I saw a question, somebody was asking, like, how do I actually get into lab and get access to some of these labs? So to do that, go to mynotebook.labarchives.com /sign up to create a free account and select I'm an instructor. The I'm an instructor is important because only people in our system who indicate they're instructors have access to the Lab Builder notebook because I don't want students in that notebook. I keep the keys separate. So example, this biochemical unknown, I don't want the students knowing the answers, but there are tips and tricks for instructors, so they're special. So I do keep students out of this notebook. So to get access, be sure you say instructor. If you log in and you don't see it, just let support know and we'll make sure you get it. Thank you, everybody. I know this is a busy and stressful time. I do hope that we've been helpful. We're going to stick around and answer more questions. I'm going to leave my contact information up here. Let's see what more questions we can answer. So I see one for simulations for evolution and ecology. So I have something that might be useful for, let's see. So the evolution and ecology. I don't know if it's perfect for you. Maybe it was in here. I think maybe this diversity of life or classification lab might be sort of appropriate, where it asks them to go outside and gather some data. The other thing that you might be interested in, there are a couple different projects called citizen science projects. One of them, a good friend of mine has used in her classroom, is called Budburst, where students go outside, collect data, perfect right now that it's spring, and they put this data in massive global databases. And so you're collecting data that is in a real scientific process, and students, especially non-majors, can kind of see that science is everywhere. So take a look at if any of these in ecology or zoology might work. I'm working as fast as I can to adapt either what we have or what I have in the queue, trying to prioritize things that might be appropriate for online. As for geosciences, I don't have a lot of that, unfortunately. I wish I did. there's just not a lot of it out there that is in the open education resource land. If we wanted to chat maybe offline, if you know of some of those, I would like to know more about it. I just haven't been able to find it. Um, to give you a little bit of history, what we have in LabArchives is either developed by me and other instructors. It might be open education resources, or it's third-party license. So something like a partnership with Veneer. So if it's not something I've worked with an instructor to write, or it is in an open education land, I just haven't been able to get my hands on it quite yet. So, sorry, I just don't have it yet. So if I have active accounts with my school, how do I get? So the question is, if you already use LabArchives and have active accounts through your school, how do you get into a course builder? So anybody who is labeled an instructor should be able to log in and see Lab Builder in their Notebook Navigator.
If you send an email to us offline, we can check what you've registered at, because you might have registered as a professional versus registering as an instructor.
Yeah.
So we would just have to switch that.
To answer the question, what stops students as registering from instructor? I play whack-a-mole. So I go in there once in a while and check, are people really students? Is it really an EDU? But I can't say that I'm not stopping everybody. So I put up that guardrail, but I can't say that not everybody is, that there won't be a student who might not be in there, which is why I try to keep anything that's super, super, super sensitive out of there, in a different spot. So I don't have, so the online A&P labs is tough. Yes, I'm trying, but yes, online A&P is tough. I think for A&P, I think that same principle of getting them to build things. So maybe having them draw, annotate, describe is going to be the best. It's something on my to-do list as well. But somebody was telling me about Primal Pictures. See if your university or college already subscribes to them, that you may already have a subscription and you don't know. That might be a good option for you. I've never used it. I haven't taught A&P, but that might be an option. So a question is about if you already use LabArchives for one course, could you use it for a new class? So as long as it's a new course, Jeremy, we're extending it free for new courses. So yes.
That is correct.
That's correct. So as long as it's a new course, it could be used for free for a new course. Yes. So discussion group. So that's a great idea, Stephen. So we haven't actually created a discussion group for instructors to share what they have created or go online with. What we are thinking about and haven't rolled out yet is creating like an instructors forum or instructors feedback. What I want to be able to do, and my grand idea in the life, is to be able to have instructors, if they say, for example, take this microbiology unknown, adapt it, and use it in their classroom, and then want to put a version back in to Lab Builder, and they've adapted it, that wants to go back in, by all means, I want to be able to continue that evolution of things, because in my having been an educator, being a big supporter of open education, the whole idea of being an educator is you share ideas, you build on each other, you figure out what works, what doesn't. And so I think maybe we can continue that conversation about how best to share things, but that's exactly where I want to go with this. That's great. Um, so pictures and videos for the procedure. So, I mean, I think that's a good point. Like we're working as we can to try to incorporate what we more videos and pictures so that we can turn that instruction around. A good something I know for chemistry, an instructor of ours at University of California, Irvine, she has the advantage right now that a couple of her TAs can be on campus, at least for a little while longer. They're videotaping the procedure, and then they're going to put that videotape on LabArchives. The students then have to evaluate what's happening, what the data is, was the safety procedures followed. She has that advantage that she had a little bit of time because they're on a quarter system. And so she had a little bit of time to get her things together. So uh, I don't have those materials for you just yet. So I think finding either if you have old data or pictures, access to old pictures and data, if you can use that and tweak what we have, that might be the best. So I think, and I think this goes along the same theme. Find a good, if anybody is familiar with, I'll show you Chem Collective. They have a lot of videos and for chemistry, videos, tutorials, things of that nature. These might be nice ways to complement maybe what we have and what you're doing or what you've already been doing and how you could complement with how can you take what's already working? How can you take your learning objectives and get everything online when you're trying to turn that massive Titanic ship around in 10 seconds? So a question was, can you change that TA role or do I add TAs by hand? TA in our mind is a loosey-goosey. TAs mean you can grade things, you can edit things, you're just not the instructor of record. So TA can actually mean professor if you want it to. I know sometimes course coordinators add their adjuncts or their co-instructors as TAs. So I'm going to end here. Send more questions. Feel free to email me. I'm so happy so many of you joined. I feel just honored that this many people are asking questions and that this was useful to you, or I hope it's useful to you. Best of luck getting ready. My heart goes out to you and your students in this time. Again, let us know if we can be of use. We have those extra webinar trainings if you need them. Our support team will walk you through. Then I know I blew through really quickly on how to set up a course. They will walk you through how do you edit? How do you get your students set up? How do you grade? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a fabulous weekend and best of luck. Thank you.